So part of biology and part of studying organisms is being able to classify them and group them um, based on a lot of different things. It might be their traits, it might be how they evolved, um, looking at their DNA, but scientists will group things together, which makes them easier to study, which makes it easier to find relationships, and then ultimately to understand and be able to recognize what types of things are affecting an organism. So this type of science is called taxonomy. So I'm going to be going over these notes here. I don't have this on the PowerPoint just yet. Then we'll go back to the PowerPoint to look at the 7 levels. So taxonomy says the science of identification and naming and classification of living things. So scientists basically have made a catalog, right, of all the living things on the planet. And remember, living things can be more than just animals. It can be plants, it can be bacteria, it can be a fungus. And we're going to go through those kingdoms in this class. But being able to classify these things tells us a lot about them, about their lives, about their evolution, about their genetics. So it's a really, really important science. It shows connections, and I'm reading letters A and B here. It shows connections between living things, and it shows the history of life. Now, when did this start? Well, you guys might have heard of a guy named Aristotle. This kind of like philosopher, lived way hundreds of years ago. He was really the first to classify organisms. He basically said, hey, we got 2 of them. We got plants, we got animals, right? Then from there, it got a little bit more complex. So he said plants have 3 subcategories based on their stems, how they look. And he said the animals, let's put them into land dwellers, air dwellers, water dwellers. That was nice. That was neat, but it got a little bit more complex from there. Now, with what we have today, we can look at their DNA, we can look at their cells, we can look at a lot of different stuff. So Aristotle didn't really have the equipment we have now to classify these things, but he was a pioneer of taxonomy. But then this next scientist, Linnaeus, Carl Linnaeus, actually his full name is Carolus Linnaeus. He used a thing called morphology, which is basically looking at the form and structure to classify organisms. And he really got us going into determining how to name organisms. So I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint here and let's talk about it. So what did Linnaeus do? And understand that Linnaeus got us started here. What I'm going to show you right now is not everything that Linnaeus did, but we've gotten a little bit more complex since then. We have this nice looking triangle here. It says kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. There are 7 levels there. It's called the 7 levels of classification. Every organism on the earth can be put into those categories. So humans, our kingdom is Animalia, right? But then we have a phylum. We'll talk about humans. We have a class, we have an order, we have a family, we have a genus, we have a species. Every time you go down a level, so when I go from kingdom to phylum or from phylum to class, the number of organisms is going to get a little bit smaller every time. And I'm going to show you a great example here in a minute. These are the 7 levels of classification, and boy, you got to know these, okay? Kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. Now let's try to remember this. King Philip came over for grape soda. It's kind of a funny one, huh? King Philip came over for grape soda. Kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. So each organism belongs to these 7 levels. So I'm using humans, us, as an example. What is our kingdom? Animalia. Our phylum is Chordata. Chordata is anything that has a backbone. So we have a backbone, we have a spine, so we fit into phylum Chordata. So we're in the same phylum with a snake, right? But we're not that similar to snakes, but we're in the same phylum because we both have backbones. Our class is Mammalia. We're mammals. Now, a snake, which I just said has a backbone, is not a mammal. It's a reptile. So now we are separated. We have the snakes going a different path than what we are. Then we go to primates. Primates are monkeys, apes, orangutans, a lot of different primates in the world. So we're in the same order as the primates. And then we have these last 3, hominidae or hominids, Homo and sapien. Those last three are really specific to our very, very close ancestors and humans. And then that last sentence basically just says the number of organisms decreases as you go down. So here's a cool little visual of how that would look. So looking at these bears. Okay, well, at the Kingdom Animalia, I have bears of all kinds, but I also have foxes, squirrels, snakes, sea stars. They're all animals. They all fit in. Well, now when I go down to Phylum Chordata, what do we take out? Well, the sea star is taken out because it doesn't have a backbone. Let's go down one more level, the mammals. Well, just like we did with humans a minute ago, I can take out the snake because it's not a mammal. Carnivores. Now, this is where we would disappear if we were in this same chart. We're not carnivores. Order Carnivora. Well, that cute little squirrel's taken out because it's not a meat eater. Then you can see family, genus, and species are very bear specific down here at the bottom. But then you get to the last thing. It says species Ursus arctos, or the grizzly bear. And we're going to talk about what that last name means. So there's this part called binomial nomenclature. So when I look at the bear here, Ursus arctos, that is the binomial nomenclature name of the grizzly bear, or we can call it the scientific name. For humans, our scientific name is Homo sapien. All right. So where do we get that? Binomial nomenclature. It uses the two last parts of our 7 levels of classification. Remember, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. Well, I'm going to use the genus name and the species name. So here, I'm going back and forth a lot. Ursus was the genus. Arctos was the species. So Ursus arctos is the binomial nomenclature of the grizzly bear. Anytime you use these, first of all, we use Latin names. Now, why in the world would we use Latin names to name species? Well, here's why. When you go to China, when you go to Russia, when you go to Japan, when you go to Brazil, when you go to America, if we're using Latin names, it's all the same. So a person in China will call a grizzly bear Ursus arctos. Why don't we just use common names? Why don't I just call a grizzly bear a grizzly bear? Well, it's going to be a different name in a different language. But if we use these Latin words with our binomial nomenclature, then it's going to be the same throughout the world. Here's the rules. Every time you do this or write the binomial nomenclature name, you always capitalize the genus name, and you do not capitalize the species name. Okay? You also have to, and I'll come back to that sentence in a minute. You also have to underline or italicize. For me, I can't write in italicized words. So when we write it, you're going to underline it. If you're typing it, you can put it in italics, and that's going to work for the genus and species name or binomial nomenclature. Now back to this third sentence there. It says avoid common names because those lead to confusion. For example, a mountain lion has 12 different names in the United States. And I don't know them off the top of my head. I just know there's a lot. Okay. The last part of the 7-part naming system, right? The genus and the species. The species is the very, very unique interbreeding, and we'll talk about that in class when everybody's here, name for a specific organism, right? So the Ursus arctos, the grizzly bear, is going to be different than the panda bear. And therefore, grizzlies can't mate with pandas. All right. So a species can only breed with other members of its species. So I already told you humans are Homo sapien. And, well, look at there, I went back. All right. So that is what we call these, first of all, 7 levels of classification. King Philip came over for grape soda, right? And then the last 2 parts of that are the binomial nomenclature, which would be the scientific name. And for humans, that's going to be Homo sapien.